Spanglish World Networks and H.E.R Network on Zingo TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Zingo TV app on respective app stores and iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. So I want to welcome back my amazing guest, Eric. We had started the topic of the 7 habits of effective,
highly effective people. Yep.
Thank you. I was like tongue twisting that. Thank you, Eric. And Eric and I had such a deep conversation in regards to the first 4 of them. And I decided, instead of speeding through it, because I really felt like this was such valuable information. And, I've already gotten a lot of feedback from our last show, Eric. So I wanted to definitely bring you back so we can kind of also go into the depths of 5, 6, and 7. So let's just go ahead and jump in, since our listeners already know who you are and they know that you're fabulous at helping us understand this. So habit number 5 is seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I feel that this is probably, well, you know what, Eric, I'm gonna be honest. I think all of them are so important, right? Like every time I get to one, I'm like, I think this is the most important one.
Right.
And and yet I feel like they're all just as equally important. You can't have one without the other. And so this to me is one of the key components that I teach the parents that I coach, that if you want to get close to your kids, then we need to be quiet. We need to hear what they're saying, not to respond, not to fix it, but to hear them so we can filter the information the way that they desire us to filter the information. So we're not like jumping the gun and trying to solve it, or jumping the gun and accusing them or blaming them, or why didn't you? It's listening to them so we can really understand their model of the world, like where are they coming from this situation. And having 6 kids, I can tell you sometimes it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And I would say it used to be more of a challenge with my younger ones. And then now that I have adult kids, that one's almost 30, I feel like it's more of a challenge now. And I feel like, because there's that expectation of, okay, you're an adult now. And so obviously when you're calling me, you need me to solve something. And
Right.
And he's like, Mom, I'm not asking you to resolve this. Like, Mom, are you listening? I'm like, of course I'm listening. And this is what I think you should do. He's like, you're not listening. So I get caught up in that conundrum as well. So tell us what you got.
Yeah. Well, I think you nailed it, because the greatest need of the human heart is to be understood. The problem that we run into as humans is, I'm on a time crunch. What do you got to say? What do you got to tell me? Okay, great. Here's how you fix it. Boom, 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 boom. And then we want to wash our hands and be done. When in the reality is, we don't know what they need because we haven't even asked them.
Right.
And so when they break into that conversation of, oh my gosh, Mom, da, 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 here's what's happening, right? And we want to be really, really aware in the relationships that we are in the situations that we're in, is to, and I always talk about having the remote control of life. Push that pause button. Push your pause. Pause, think, and choose that response. But wait until you know what it is that they're talking about. I mean, you think about how common it is that we are conditioned, so conditioned to listen with the intent to reply, and not listening for true understanding. I mean, why do we think that is the proper way to communicate? I don't know.
Yeah. I was just on a call with a friend yesterday, and she was saying that she connects her heart to her head, right? The head is constantly like, how do I solve it? What do I need to say? Is it my turn to speak? I want to say this. I want to say that. But if we start to connect the heart to the mind, what is the heart saying?
Yeah.
And she gave me an example. She goes, even in this conversation with you, Veenu, she goes, there's 3 times my heart was saying, be quiet. There's no need to speak right now. And my head was like, no, you want to say it. She goes, and I just chose not to speak because I really have learned that in order to really communicate, and she has 2 daughters, so in order to communicate with my young kids or, the people in my life, I have to make sure that my heart and my head are actually connected and on the same
Mhm.
page. And she goes, "And you'll be surprised how much you realize you don't need to talk.
Yeah.
You really don't need to talk."
Yeah.
So one of the
Yeah.
one of the components of 5 is listening with empathy. So for our listeners, can you just explain what would that look like to you as someone who teaches this to schools for 20 plus years and students? What does that mean to listen with empathy?
Yeah, taking a look at it in this perspective, in communication, right? Only 7% of how we communicate is in the actual words that we use.
That's correct.
And like you said, the rest of it is coming from our heart. We're picking up on the emotion of which they're saying it. Maybe it's in the tonality, maybe it's in the pause or the breath that they're taking, the exhale, if you will. And then what are we visualizing with them in terms of where's their body language, where are they looking, how are their arms folded, what's their posture. And I think when I become really, really aware of that, and by the way, it's different for all people, right? Especially within the family unit, how I talk and address things with my wife is very, very different from each of my 3 kids. And so I want to come at the situation listening with my eyes, my ears, and my heart. And really, listening is an art and it's a skill that we develop.
Mm,
And it's about taking that process of me. Oh my gosh, I have learned this the hard way over and over and over, pulling my emotion out of that.
yeah.
It's not about me and why why I do that. And I step myself in like there's an open door. Let me go right in there and just throw my emotion out. And then what happens then? I mean, think about your twins. What happens when you come at that conversation? We learned in habit 1 about being reactive. If I bring reactivity into that conversation, what's the outcome and the impact on that
Well,
conversation?
that's what the emotion is, right? A lot of times we're in the emotion, we're in the reactive. We're
Yeah.
totally in the reactive. And I have learned from another mentor that, when our emotions are high, our intellect is low. We're
Mhm.
not even thinking. We are a driven motor from the emotion that we're feeling in that moment. And you brought up something, a good opportunity for us to like really dissect this. When we are rushed, what happens?
Yeah.
We're snappy. We don't have time for anything. Our mind is on the consequences of being late versus just being present in the moment.
Right.
And so
Right.
what are we teaching our kids then too? It's that, when you're rushed, it's okay to be mad. It's okay to blame. It's okay to shame. And so
Hmm.
we're not listening with the empathy. We're not, and especially if we are already listening to solve the problem or to, you know, redefine what the problem is for our kid, we're not even listening with empathy because we're not even feeling their model of their world. We're not even allowing ourselves to feel their emotion. We're creating our own emotion in that moment. And
Right.
so, like you said, with the twins, we again today we had another little combativeness with what my daughter was wearing to school, as we always do on Fridays. Fridays is our challenge day because they don't have to wear their uniform, so it's dress down.
Hmm. Hmm.
And my daughter has sensory issues with some of her clothing.
Yeah.
And here we go again. It's like I wake up on Friday with already like, oh gosh, whew, how are we going to combat this opportunity this morning with clothing again?
Yeah.
And you know me very well. So, I'm all about, okay, if that doesn't work, change my approach. She now has a coach. So I went to her coach and going, what's the opportunity that I'm not seeing? Right. Because I'm not going to coach my own kid as you don't coach yours. We always get coaches for our kids because we're the
Yeah.
parent, not the coach. And so I'm using the strategies and they're still not working. And again, I went to emotion. I definitely raised my voice. And my daughter, then what does she do? Again, reactive, raises her voice.
Yeah.
And so we had 5 minutes of both of us kind of just pleading our case to each other. We were so in reactive.
Yeah.
And then I don't even think it was about the clothes anymore. Now it was a power struggle. Who's in control? Who's going to win?
Exactly. And so then you begin to look at, well, what's the impact on the relationships if I don't seek first to understand? And because if I am coming from my place of an autobiographical thought, feeling, emotion on this, how is that going to get in the way? And then where are those coming from? Is there consistency in that for you in this scenario? It's every Friday. It's consistent. And so I would challenge parents and educators and
B.
clients,
Go ahead. You can say it. And
you,
B.
you, look at the patterns. What are the behavior patterns that lead up to Thursday night? And as that stress begins to build, okay, here goes Friday morning. What's going to happen now? How can I backtrack that to go, Friday's coming? Maybe I should begin looking at this with her of, hey, you got any thoughts or ideas about what you're going to wear on Friday? Can we begin looking at, do you have your favorite shirt? Is it I can't find my favorite shirt that's tagless because it's a sensory thing. My son was in that as well. Had to have certain clothes and would wear those same things over and over again, right? And so, what gets in the way of listening effectively, if you will? What gets in the way of being able to continue with that open communication?
I think it's expectations. I
Yeah,
think it's frustration.
yeah,
you know so we pre-plan on Thursday nights. I've done the whole, okay, this section of your closet is school, going out to dinner, going to a friend's house.
yeah.
This
That's
section of your closet is go dig in the dirt with dad and paint and get stains all over it. And these couple outfits are if we go to a party or somewhere nice.
yeah.
So on school days, on Fridays, the only dress down day we get, this section, you have the choice of choosing whatever you want to wear.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
mom, I got it. So we wake up today, we get dressed, and it's not one of those outfits.
Yeah.
And so we went again around and around. And it's like, but I noticed something just because what you've said. I was listening to solve. I
Right.
was not, and I think not only do I make this mistake as I'm being so vulnerable, and and I'm going to be honest with the listeners out there. It is easy. I mean, you and I are both coaches. It's easy for us to see your blind spots, right? It's very
Mm-hmm.
difficult to see our own, and that's why you and I both have coaches because we want that opportunity to grow ourselves. And
Yeah.
so I will say this as a parent, it's easy to say, I appreciate what you're saying, and because in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm appreciating what she's saying. No, I'm not. It's a robotic answer, right? I'm a coach, and it definitely is appreciation. And I've noticed that I am not listening to her the way I listen to my clients.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I am so not. And you just made that very clear to me because when I was like thinking, I'm like, I'm not. I'm like, I appreciate that's not what you want to wear. It's not comfortable, and you're going to do this, right? So I don't do that with my clients. When I
Right.
listen to them, I actually rephrase what they're saying. And I'm like, so what I hear you saying is this. So that's actually listening to understand them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there is that difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I totally understand. As you're looking at in habit number 5 with practicing empathic listening, there's really begins with the process of having the intent to listen, right?
Mm,
So if I'm aware of time constraints, I'm aware of emotions, I'm aware of different situational things, stress. I mean, I can remember the biggest arguments we ever had in the family was on the way to church because we were late, we were this, we were that. And it's like, and then the car door opens and we're like, yes, praise Jesus, we're here. Right. And then it's like, wait a minute, we've just had World War III on the way to church because somebody wasn't ready. This wasn't that, and all this commotion. Right. So if we start with the intent to enter into that conversation in a space and place of heart and head connection, that's when we begin to use that skill of reflecting the words, of which you just model so beautifully. Tell me
Right.
how you're feeling about this, right? It's a if this then this, right? You feel upset. It sounds like you're upset about this. Sounds like you're angry. Sounds like you're frustrated.
Mhm.
How can I best serve you? How can I best help you in this?
Right.
Is that part of that? Or is it just in they got to have a verbal dump of feelings and emotions?
Right. And if they do, so just to piggyback off what you're saying is, so speaking professionally now, I have some clients that do like that authoritative type of leadership where it's like, so in your tone, I'm
Yeah.
hearing this feeling. I have some clients that do not respond very well. So what I might say to them is, I hear a different tone in your voice.
Mhm.
Tell me what you're feeling. Help me understand what that tone means because they don't want to be told how they're feeling. So
Right.
be open to knowing, again, this comes to knowing that every child is not the same.
Yep.
I have some of my children that definitely like help with associating what they're feeling to the tone. And I definitely have more than the little ones that do not like to be told how they're feeling.
Mhm.
It's they like to be questioned, like, okay, the way you're talking to me, I feel disrespected. Please tell me what you're feeling right now.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
or I might say, I feel that you're being defensive. I'm not sure if you are because I don't want to make them defensive. Like, this is where kids, for the listeners out here, your kids get defensive when they
Yep.
feel accused.
Right. Right.
Plain and simple.
Yep.
So it's creating that space. And that's what I think that number 5 actually does. It leads you to creating that open and safe and trusting space for your child to want to communicate with you. Because if you get in the pattern of doing number 5, seek first to understand, then be understood, you're listening with empathy, you're respectfully seeking to be understood, right? Then they know there's no judgment because you're not ready to pounce on them and blame them and, go into like, well, why this, why that? You're just there to hear,
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
really hear
Yeah.
them. So, is there anything else you want to say about that, or should we go ahead and jump into 6?
Yeah, just one thing that I think really ties it together for parents, because I know for me as a parent, it did as well. If you use a stoplight, if you
Mhm.
will, as a metaphor, red light, stop. That emotion is really high. My job there is to not be talking, but listening and allowing that child or that person to get it out.
Nice.
Right, as the yellow light happens there, slow down, watch, be ready to use empathic listening, where I might come in now as we know, the curious questioning. This is where that interjection of that is so powerful. In the green light is when they're asking us for advice, they're asking us what they should do, depending upon um, the amount of trust in relationships. You and we're in green, right? And so you could say, hey, Eric, what about this? Or I could say, hey, Veenu, what about this? I'm giving you that permission to solve or fix that for me,
Mm,
and vice versa, right? But when you start adding emotion and layers of emotion, that's where we get stuck in making those mistakes instead of just listening.
right. I just wanted to throw in one little, technique for parents that I use that's a little playful. Um, and and then we'll move on to number 6.
Yep.
So one of the techniques that I share with families is having a family meeting at least once a month, but ideally it would be great if it was every Sunday, right? We have a family
Mhm.
meeting, just like you do in your business. If you're an entrepreneur, you should have business meetings so you can see what's going on, you know, in the business and outside of the business, right? So what are we what was the old news? What were we working on? Let's check in. What's the new issues that are at hand, and what's going great, whatever. So one of the issues that the kids were having is the minute they start talking, the parents want to already pounce on them. No, that's not what we, and correct them.
Yeah.
So I said, well, why don't you get a duck? And I had learned this from another parenting coach. And it's like, get a duck. And the minute your parent starts to interrupt you when you're talking, so whoever has the duck gets to talk.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute that you get the duck, you get to talk. If someone interrupts you, you just quack it.
Yeah.
And my family couldn't find a duck, but they found a pig. And I'm going to tell you, it was a hoot for me just to monitor that, family meeting, because that pig was going off all the time. But you know what it did? It brought awareness
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to each individual of how many times they try to cut someone off, or how many times they try to interrupt or intrude on their time to speak. So, if you're listening out there, go get a pig, go get a duck, go get a dog. It's something that when you squeak it, it allows the other person to realize that they're interrupting you. They're totally not listening to you, and you don't feel you're being heard in that moment. So just a little strategy to throw out there to kind of make it a little bit more playful as well. But I definitely love your analogy of the stoplight, the red, the yellow, and the green. Like that. That's just absolutely beautiful. So go ahead, Eric, take us into number 6.
Yeah, number 6 is a lot of fun. Why? Because it is the result of us being successful, effective with habits 4 and habits 5. And so habit number 6, synergize, is a result of thinking win-win, seeking first to understand, then to be understood. And then together, we're now in this place of collaboration and not competition, right?
I like
And
it.
when we find ourselves in competition, we're not in win-win. We're in win-lose, lose-win, or lose-lose. Okay.
Right.
If there's competition in what we're saying in communication, now we're not seeking first to understand. It's my way or the highway. So we're not going to get into the collaboration of habit number 6. Now, commonly we look at habit number 6, and one of the common things that we see in that is the terminology, let's compromise. And I know in today's society, compromise is looked at as a good thing. Compromise happens because there's not enough trust in relationships. When we get to a win-win, we're building the trust in that relationship. I'm going for a win, you're going for a win, and we're coming together in agreement of what it is, the scope of whatever it is that we're coming to agreement on. If it's a parent-child, it could be chores, it could be, systems and processes within the home. In classrooms, we talk about the class rules. We change the language and say it's a constitution, it's a recipe for a success. It's we put that leadership language to it, if you will. And so looking at the common paradigm here with that in the compromise, it actually, somebody gives up something that they're not happy about.
Mm.
Turn
Can
on the
you
news.
can
Turn
you
on the
give
news.
yeah, I was going to say, can you give like maybe like working with one of your clients, like what that would look like?
Yeah. So generally this is happening, within a family unit. Let's take that, since we're in that space of looking at, parents would like this, kids would like that. And so we're not on the same page in communication. And so again, when we get into that mindset, heart space of competition, and we're not willing to search for a solution that's better than what we're doing right now, that's when we don't achieve synergy or collaboration, and we stay in that space of competition. And so we begin to reject or tolerate what's going on, differences in the situations that we might not agree to or like. And then we settle.
Mm.
And that's a tough
Isn't
place.
it?
What's the impact? What's the impact if we settle?
So from experience, I would say settling brings you to finally a point of escape or leaving.
Yeah.
Um, you know, avoiding,
Mhm.
avoiding conflict. So you just settle for what it is. Unhappiness, constantly thinking of what it should be like or what it could be like. So then that can leave you into depression because you can't even be focused on what is great in your life because you're so focused on what you settled for. So it definitely can lead you down that rabbit hole,
Right.
just to settle. And so as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh gosh, that does not feel, that word doesn't feel good.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I would rather get to a place where, in our family, or leading clients to this place, that they're in that celebration
yes,
because they've got the win-win. They're actively seeking to understand. And this truly is where we see families coming back together
right.
that have been estranged, that have been having issues in dealing with those relationships for whatever reasons, and bringing those people back together again.
Yeah, in my 6-week program, Crack the Code to Parenting, um, I I think it's week 5, I talk about the family meeting and the agreement,
Yeah.
and I always tell parents, the kids already know what you want. If
Hmm.
if they didn't know what you want, I would not be in your life.
Right.
It's the combativeness of them feeling constantly dictated to, them not feeling heard, and I
Hmm.
can list on everything. And I said, so let's give them an opportunity to come up with an agreement, knowing what your expectations are, clean your room, be in charge of your bathroom, do your dishes, whatever. So give them an opportunity to say when they want to do it, how they want to do it,
Yeah.
what's the reward for doing it, and if they don't do it, what's their consequence.
Yeah.
Get yourself out of it because you're the bad guy because, oh, you didn't do it, so now you can't go spend the night because your room is a mess.
Right.
Which I always tell parents, the time should fit the crime. So if you don't want them leaving their room like that, so of course they're not going to go spend the night at their friend's house until they get
Yeah.
their room done. But if they come up with it, then you're out of that responsibility. There's compromise, and you have to agree to it anyway. So it's a full compromising situation where no one is settling.
Hmm.
It's a time to say, okay, here's what I want, here's what you want. What is that going to look like for both of us to have that win-win situation? And I think I actually brought this up when we were talking about the win-win situation, So it's interesting how you said this all ties it together, but it's like tying it together, with that bow. And one of the things that I like about, habit number 6, the synergize, is that it's celebrating the differences between us.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
I was just on a call earlier today when I was teaching another class, and somebody brought up is that, you know, instead of always looking at like, what's different about us, there's so many things that we do have in common too.
Yeah.
And to take that even a step further is when we do have differences, how do we celebrate them? Because that's what makes us an individual.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think in today's, world, society, if you will, how often are differences looked at as strengths? I
Mm,
would much rather know what makes Veenu Keller different from me and understand that and celebrate you in that fashion rather than going, oh my gosh, did you hear about Veenu? Right? That's
right.
the place that it's so common to being in again. Right. And so in the family unit, then how often do we as parents we compromise our time? We compromise what we're doing to then rescue that child and just do it for them rather than getting them engaged in that in helping out in the family in a chore or whatever that situation is, right? And so that's where the danger of settling for compromise just to get things done.
So this just totally came to me. So I go around the country, the world, speaking on bullying, right? Like, how do we support this time and age in schools
Yeah.
where bullying's still going on, just like it did when we were kids?
Hmm.
And instead of being anti-bullying against the bully, we can really realize the needs that are being met from that child having the bullying behavior to
Yep.
feel their self-worth and connection. And if we started at home to teach our kids to celebrate the differences versus talk about or judge people for the differences, what if that was an antidote to the bullying epidemic that's in schools? Because they're already learning it at home. So when they go to school, they're not looking at the person with a different color skin or the different religion or the different race or, the different gender identity. They're not seeing it as different as let's talk about it because it gives us something in common to talk about and makes us close and makes them feel ostracized. We can celebrate, and this is where my whole curious, not critical comes in, because if we could teach our kids to be even more curious,
Mhm.
so if you're going to talk about it as in a curiosity way. Like, I
Yeah.
wonder what life looks like at their home. I wonder why there's a headdress that they have to wear every day. What does that mean to them? And what would it look like if they didn't wear it? And be curious about it and intrigued about it, because you just might learn something. And that person that you were making fun of might just be your new best friend, because you might just find out some interesting things that they're doing or studying or whatever that intrigue you. So instead of being the bully to get connection, you can now be the friend to get
Yep.
connection. Like,
Yep.
I think that's just as important. Like, I think every habit is what we need.
Yeah, for sure. So if there was something to challenge our listeners on, Veenu, I would say this: the next time you have your family meeting, if you will, educators, we talk about this in your community circles, your morning meetings. Begin to have the kids talk with each other or in the families to identify what each of the strengths are. What am I good at? What do I like to do? and
Mm.
then and then we can take that piece of paper that we write it on and pass it to each member of the family around the table. And then when I get it back, each member of my family has written down all my strengths. What a beautiful gift to have, and to really have clarity of how I am being seen as a strength member of that family or a strength member in that classroom. And so now we're looking at the anti-bullying, and we can rewire that to say, let's look at that as being pro-kind. How do we do
Yes.
that? How do we take that thought pattern and process into the operations within a family unit or the operations within a classroom, of which kids are actively seeking out the differences and looking at them as positives? It's a whole game changer.
No, I think it totally is. And so one of the things that I talk about when I'm going to schools and talking about the bullying, self-harm, and suicide concept is being an upstander, not a bystander.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
feel like with this information that we're discussing right now, that's a clear component of it, of
Yeah.
being an upstander by celebrating the differences, helping people see the differences as a great thing, as a strength, as like you were saying, instead of a weakness and something to attack. So I love this whole thing. Like, this is such an amazing and important topic,
Mhm.
because for the listeners who heard our first show when we talked about the first four, and now we're completing the whole cycle with the other three, how many of you have already started to implement some of these and started to see the change already? I mean, I know I have,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
obviously by this morning, I need to do a little bit, a better job or enhance some other opportunities there. But the point is that when we are able to take any of these steps, literally any of them, and just use them, I feel that we'll see a difference in our own family.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And friends out there, that are watching this, listen, identify, if you will, something small to begin with.
Mm.
Like, don't jump into these 7 habits thinking, I'm going to turn the family inside out, upside down, backwards, or we're going to get all through, because you're going to lose steam like that. Identify in each one of these habits something small that you can begin to implement that's going to have a big impact, and
Uh,
start there first and build the awareness around that.
that is amazing. Amazing. And that will lead us now into habit number 7. Sharpen the saw. What does that mean? Sharpen the saw.
Sharpen the saw. I love this one, and because it's all about us. It's all about us taking care of us. What are
Mhm.
we doing? Now, I can tell you that there are many, many times where I, over the course of my life, has said, I am too busy today to take care of myself. So
Oh,
I
yes.
will put my needs aside to love and serve everyone else. And I'm going to be that perfect martyr in my life. And then all of a sudden, I've tacked on 15 extra pounds and I'm not sleeping well and I'm not eating right. And all of that compounds. And now I'm like, I feel terrible. I feel awful. So let's look at four really, really key areas here: your body, your heart, your mind, and your spirit. Okay. Now, obviously, body, let's talk physical, right? Exercise, rest, stress management. Taking a look at that. I know for you, Veenu, you're the pickleball queen in North Carolina, right? You're out there every morning and having at it, and you're taking care of
5
yourself,
o'clock in the morning today. Pickleball.
right? See, that's awesome. And you're sharpening your saw. I can't cut wood with a dull saw. I can't navigate life. I can't do life if I'm dull, if you will. Taking a look at the heart. What am I doing in the key relationships in my life? How am I loving and serving and making those deposits that we talked about into the emotional bank account and building trust and love with people around me? So, really being aware of my wife, of my kids, the clients that I have, the people that I serve, and doing those small things over time, right? Looking at your mind, you're reading, writing, learning, studying. What am I doing to challenge myself with that? What's the last good book I read for me? Right? Talk about with kids all the time. They're like, oh, I gotta study all the time, man. Like I read all the time. Yeah, but when have you read something for you? What are you interested in?
Mm,
And if it's not reading, is it watching a YouTube video? We're into that, phase. Watch a YouTube video. What are you learning from that? It's
or
phenomenal,
or a great podcast like Redefine Parenting, you know? Like
right?
if we're not filling up the brain with
Yeah,
beautiful, luscious gardens, we're going to get weeds,
absolutely.
you know? And
Absolutely.
so this is where I say take out the weeds. The fertilizer is the resources we're using to implement in our mind the information to help us grow.
Yeah,
Because if we're growing, we're teaching our kids to grow too.
yeah, absolutely. The last of these four dimensions, Vino, is the spirit. And
Mm,
so this is where that um, the heart for service really comes in. Is what am I doing there for service? Maybe it's looking at my values. Maybe it's looking at our family values. What do we stand for?
nice.
What is important for us as a family?
Mm,
And taking a look at that. Maybe it's reading out of inspirational literature, getting out into nature. Is it meditation? Um, what am I doing? There are so many options out there. I love going down the street here. I'm here in Southern California along the coast, and I love that the park down the street. There's a gal that comes and does the sound bowl healing, and she has a group out there. There's people doing Tai Chi. Is that right?
yeah, Tai Chi.
Yes. There's people out there doing yoga at the park, which is just up on the bluff overlooking the ocean. Beautiful scenery, right? And so they're targeting all of those things at once as they're looking at getting into that.
Yeah, it's interesting because my daughter's coach was just telling me that, like, her and her son and husband have a night of meditation where
Mhm.
they all sit down and they all take a deep breath in and they just allow themselves to just be with
Yeah.
no criticism, with nothing, no talking. They set a timer and they just go into a meditation and allowing their body to be calm, allowing to feel every cell in their body. And I was like, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, this is so amazing. You know, it's just a collectiveness that we get to bring to our kids. And what I love about these four sections, it's the makeup of who we are. So
Mhm.
if
Mhm.
we're able to do this as a family, you know, because repetition's mother of skill. So I'm going to say it again. This is our
Yeah.
boot camp with our kids from
Yeah.
birth to 18. So if we're doing that, imagine us doing that all the time in our home. Yeah, and it could be twice a week, it could be 3 times a week, 5 days a week, like, you figure it out. But even if
Mhm.
it was just, let's just pretend it was 1 time a week you had that collective mind together as a family.
Yeah.
What are they gonna do at 18 when they step outside of those doors, right? Like,
Mhm.
they are gonna carry these habits into their future, into their adulthood. And I think it's so important, like, because people ask me all the time, like, is it important for kids to know faith? Is it important for kids to know God? You know, in my experience, yes, it is. And it's with the caveat of letting them know that there's a wide world out there that you're going to be
Mhm.
able to explore and figure it out yourself. And here's my experience, and this is why I share it with you. And this is why we go to church on Sunday. This is why we do Bible study at night, or whatever your faith is, right? But I think that also comes into that spirituality, like the spirit.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. All of that really ties together in a neat little package in that spirit. What and when I hear my kids say or parents say, my kid doesn't want to be actively engaged in the home. They don't want to do chores. They don't want to that. And I say, well, let's look at what the gift is in service and having that conversation. And because for some people it's not until they understand the why behind that. Like we used to on Thanksgiving, we did this a number of years. We went and fed the homeless on Thanksgiving.
Yep.
And when the kids were younger, and they were like, wait, why are we doing this? Why are we, our turkey will come later or tomorrow. We actually put it off a day. Turkey's turkey, it'll still be there.
Right.
Like, we can be in service and have that heart for service and do this today to bless the lives of someone else because we want to get our kids actively in that space to understand how to do that, the why behind getting into that space.
And there's so many opportunities by teaching kids at a young age to
Yep.
volunteer.
Yep.
I've done the same thing. I'm in North Carolina, and I would drive up to Baltimore,
Mhm.
Maryland, every Thanksgiving and go serve the homeless at a church up there.
Yeah.
And that was a tradition, and I'd bring my kids and we would do it. And then here where we live, we're in a very military town. And so
Mhm.
sometimes the military troops don't get to go home for Christmas.
Yep.
So I remember one Christmas, I told the kids, I said, before we do any presents, we're going to go feed the
Mhm.
military guys that can't go home for the holidays.
Mhm.
And what was beautiful about that, because I had put a sense of service above self
Yeah.
into my kids, they weren't like, why? Like, can we do this first? They were like, oh, okay. And then, it was interesting because when we got home, they were like, oh, well, we'll just do Christmas tonight. Like, they weren't even like, okay, my turn, my turn. It was like, oh, we'll do it later. And they were so into the service of it. And
Mhm.
the other concept of this that I also like is the understanding of entitlement, right? When we teach our kids service above self, like, there's other people less fortunate,
Mhm.
it makes them appreciate even more what we have. And so, years ago, I was a single mom raising my two boys by myself, working 3 jobs to make ends meet. And I remember us doing a basket brigade here. So we would go and make full turkey baskets, and we would deliver them to people that were less unfortunate than we were. And my boys, we would go into the homes. And I remember when we came home, my kids would go with different people, and then we would all come home. And when we got home, we were sitting and we were doing our, eating dinner. And they said, Mom, can I share something with you? And I said, sure, hon, what? And he says, I will never say there's nothing to eat in our home again. And I said, really? I was kind of excited about that, right? And I said, so what changed? What changed? And they said, because this one home I went in, he's like, and I know we weren't supposed to go in, Mom, but like, they were in a wheelchair. So I went in, and I said,
Mhm.
it's okay. I mean, you had the adult with you. And he said, they asked us if we would mind putting the stuff away in the cabinets. And I opened up the cabinet, and they had just one box of mac and cheese. That's all they had, Mom. And it's like I get chills and I get cheered up even
Yeah.
thinking about it. It's like that was such a gift to my
Mhm.
children.
Mhm.
It was such a gift to me because
Yeah.
here I was striving to make sure we had food in our house and working the 3 jobs to make ends meet, to make sure my boys had food to eat. And they finally got it.
Yeah.
They finally got it. That how much we take advantage of the laundry, the washer, the dryer. I was just reading on Facebook, somebody was posting that, my kid's sick. We don't have a washer and dryer. We're running out of clothes,
Mm.
and it's like, wow, like all the things that we take for granted,
Yeah.
that it's almost like habit number 7 gives us that opportunity to really bring it home and teach gratitude,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know? So and I feel like also this also brings us to the balance of life. Like,
Mhm.
you mentioned it, like we're working, we're going to school, we're parenting, and then we have sports. And it's like, where's the self-care? We forget about it and over. Then what are we giving? And I've
Right.
even noticed with myself, and I'm sure you have your own stories, but at night, I'm rushing to the kitchen to sit down with the family, have my meal, and then I got to get back on another coaching call because I coach kids.
Mhm.
After school is the only time we get to coach. So
Yep.
I got to go run 30 minutes and eat and then come back because I got 3 more coaching calls to do. And it's like when I'm running down there, my kids want my attention. I'm kind of already spent. Like, I'm like, because all I can think about is I got 3 more hours of work. Like, I'm still in work mode. So I invite my listeners out there to really think about, where's your mindset when you're with your
Mhm.
kids,
Mhm.
you know? So here's one of the strategies that I use now. It's when I walk out of my office that's in my home, I leave my work mind strategy in my office.
Yep.
It's like I'm walking into another dimension. I'm walking into my mom identity, my family identity, you know? And now I'm like, I even leave my phone in my office because if I
Mhm.
only got 30 minutes with them, I'm going to take that 30 minutes. We're going to talk about their day at school. We're going to talk about what they're excited about. There's so many opportunities in that moment. But what I'm realizing that we put so much focus on self-care. We put so much focus on parenting and meeting our kids' needs. We put focus on giving time to our partners and our spouses. What does quality time really look like? So,
Yeah.
as we're wrapping up here, it's looking at the balance of your life.
Mhm.
I invite you guys to Google the life wheel and just ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you at in each of those areas of the life wheel? And what would have to happen to take it to that next number?
Yeah.
Who would you have to be? What would you have to do? What could you do for your kids? And that would really support how you sharpen your saw.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we have just a minute left. Eric, what do you want to say to our listeners? You've been so fabulous. Thank you for sharing all of this. Um,
Thank you. Thank you.
what, how do we tie a bow on this? I'm going to let you tie that bow for us.
Yeah, I would say for anybody listening, wherever you're going to incorporate this is, begin with yourself. Begin identifying what you need to do to be able to model that behavior, the thought patterns, the belief systems into your day-to-days, infuse it into what you're already doing in a way that's going to help your results, and watch how quickly other people get on board with you.
Eric, that is amazing. And just remember to be curious, not critical. We're all in this together. It definitely takes that village. If you are finding value in the conversation here on our show, please join our Redefine Parenting group on Facebook for even more tips and conversation. Do someone you know a favor and share my group with them as well, so they too can hear what they need to in order for them to feel supported in their parenting journey. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it.